right, we are here today with Pete Johnson, practically a mortgage celebrity here in Johnson County, one of the highest volume mortgage lenders. Don't be shy,
I don't know
right?
Gotta be proud.
He's got it going on, doesn't he?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we asked Pete to come onto our podcast here today because we wanted to talk about an interesting topic. We're talking about high performers and the fact that success leaves clues. So, Pete, you are exposed to hordes of us realtors day in and day out. We're all up in your business.
Right.
You can't get away from us. You get to see the best to the worst. So I am really curious if you have noticed any traits that agents who seem to be high performers or are well on their way to becoming high performers, what do they do?
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing I think is people that treat it like a business. So you kind of get kind of two categories of realtors. So you got ones that are kind of like really engaged and treat it like a business and have the processes in place, to run it like a business. And then you have other people where it's almost like a hobby, right? Like, so they're not quite as responsive. They're, they've got other things going on in their life, which everybody does. I mean, everybody's like super busy. They've got their kids and their family to deal with. But the ones that kind of really engage in it and treat it like a business are the ones that I think really do the best or struggle the least, I should say. And then, responsiveness is probably the biggest thing. Those that kind of get back to their clients, that are kind of on top of it. Are the ones that kind of do a little bit better than some of the other ones where, there's a delay. And in this environment now, it's same for us as lenders. It's what can you do for me this second? It used to be that you had, a couple business days to respond. Like the etiquette they used to say you have 24 hours was like business etiquette. It used to be like 48, I think, when I got in. And now it's like 5 minutes,
There's no 48 hours.
There's no 48 hours.
No.
It's 5 minutes or they're moving on, right? And that's just kind of the speed at which people move. Everybody's online now. Everybody's using, cell phones and text messages. And so, the people that can adapt to that, you really got to be on the ball. You really got to treat it like a profession, as opposed to a hobby. It's just hard to run this thing as a hobby.
I like that.
Yeah.
Profession over hobby.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel like there's a difference between the way full-time agents and part-time agents treat it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's kind of in the distractions. It's I always say, having at bats, when I talk to like younger, like loan officers that are kind of coming in, it's, you want to be in a position where you have at bats. The more at bats you have, the better off you are. And it's not that you're not trying or that you're a bad person or, a bad, professional if you don't, but the fewer at bats you have, the less you're learning, the less you're becoming good at what you do, right? You're not quite as good at your craft, so to speak, right? And so if you're doing it part-time, you're just not getting the at-bats. And so you're just not getting the experience I don't think you need to be good at it,
Okay, so here's a question that a lot of agents out there they're turning up their volume right now to listen to this.
Or down.
Or down. They don't want to hear it. When you talk to your clients, your buyer clients, do they ever spill the tea on the agents? What do agents do that just tick off buyers?
Yeah, I think right now, especially, it comes back to that responsiveness thing where they, buyers are really anxious. They're always coming in, especially first-time home buyers. People that are really internet driven, they're getting on Zillow. They're doing a lot of this research themselves, and so they're seeing a lot of these properties sometimes before their agent even knows about them. And they're anxious to get an offer and they're anxious to get an offer accepted and they want feedback immediately. Right. And so when they get delays like that, they start to get anxious. If they want to write an offer now and they can't get an offer in, or their agent delayed and the house got swooped up in the time frame that they were, taking to get, back from kids gymnastics thing or, whatever they were doing. That kind of stuff is probably the thing. And then communication through the process. So through the transaction, if they're not kind of staying in communication, they start to feel lost. And I think a lot of buyers start to feel like they're doing all the work themselves. That's kind of a thing I hear a lot is that, it's like, oh, so-and-so was, great initially when we first called them and got us right in and, explained a lot. And then they just kind of drifted off. And we feel like we've been doing a lot of the communication with the seller's agent ourselves or, that kind of thing. And and it's not always warranted. You have people that get a little anxious and kind of jump ahead of the process. But that's kind of the big thing I hear, a lot.
So it sounds like buyers are uncomfortable with the quiet periods in a transaction. And if the agent isn't talking to them, they think the agent isn't doing anything, even if the agent is doing things behind the scenes that the
Right.
buyer is not even aware of.
Right. They're not checking in with them. And I'd say the other thing is process, in terms of, one of the biggest reasons that agents lose deals, and it always kind of amazes me, is when somebody comes in and, I'll have somebody come in and they've been working with, so they've been working with Adam, for example, for like 2 months, right? And Adam's been driving all over town, showing them a million properties, spending hours and hours and hours with them. And then they go and make an offer with another agent. And
That
I
never
always say,
happens.
Yeah. Yeah, out of the blue. And so they'll come in, I'm like, hey, what? And it's super awkward for me too. It's
Yeah.
always a great conversation because, Adam will have referred the deal to me. And now I'm like, oh, what's going on? What happened? It was like, did Adam do something crazy? Or it's like, oh, no, I just saw the sign out front. I thought I had to make an offer, with that
They
with
just
that
didn't
agent.
know.
Right. And they just didn't know. And so, that conversation didn't happen up front. And I guess it's maybe an uncomfortable conversation initially with the agents. I don't know what that is, but to be able to say, hey, this is how this relationship works. This is how the realtor process works. A lot of times people don't know.
I would love to work for you, but I am working for free
Right.
until we get to
Right.
closing.
Well, and I think, it's not necessarily their fault because they don't know with me, like that we work on commission, that we don't get paid unless, a deal closes with us. They don't know that. Right. So they don't have any clue. And so they maybe didn't do it on purpose, but you lost them just simply because the process didn't get disclosed up front. And that kind of goes back to the processes, right? Not having the processes in place with your initial presentation so that they understand that to eliminate that threat.
Okay, so flip side of this same question, is there something that realtors do across the board that just grinds your gears as the loan officer?
Where do I start? How much time do we have with this podcast? All my friends at Hills Bank are kind of like, get him. There's always things, but I think it's kind of some of the same things for us. It's kind of the communication piece, when, a lot of the realtors, I'm pretty fortunate to work with a group of realtors. The realtors that I work with, Emily, you're one of them, the group of realtors that I tend to work a lot with, kind of recognize the value in having a mortgage loan officer as a partner, right? We're not just like a transactional person that you just kind of like get your buyer off to. There's a lot of realtors that are like that, where they're just kind of like, I'm going to stay out of the financing. You just go find your loan. It's none of my business, right? Whereas you've got other agents that kind of see us as a partner and kind of see the importance of us both working together.
I want you to
communicating.
answer my text messages
Yeah,
at 9:30
exactly.
at night.
Yeah, that too. Back and forth communication. It goes, and it's a two-way street. It's not just the loan officer kind of talking to the realtor, but also the realtor kind of communicating, like calling us and asking, how best to write the purchase agreement, things like that, right? So you get a lot of stuff that gets into purchase agreements that isn't right up front. Then we have to go back and change it. That always leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. Anytime you're having to change something, they're like, why are we changing this? Like I thought, why wouldn't this be right to begin with, right? And so kind of recognizing those things, making sure things get done right, like up front, and understanding what's going on behind the scenes with the financing. Because if the financing falls apart, at the end of the day, like if something goes wrong and, I can't really blame my team. And likewise, you can't really blame, your loan officer to your client, because the client sees you. You're the person that sent them to the loan officer, right? And kind of recognizing that, recognizing the value that it adds to your business, is kind of key. And so a lot of agents kind of don't do that. And then there ends up being lots of miscommunication. It kind of comes back down to that communication piece,
So one thing for me as a professional, when I am referring another person to a client, I am sticking a gold star on my referral. So when I introduce you to a client, I've said, Pete is a rock star.
Right.
Pete will take care of it. And I have a lot of trust in you because I know that you're going to live up to that. When I refer to somebody and they let me down,
Right.
I am incredibly cautious if I'm ever putting them on my list again.
Yep.
That's weird. I never would have noticed that.
Yeah. Because they made me look bad.
That's right.
You know?
Absolutely.
Don't make me look bad.
Yeah. And it's and it goes the other way. It goes back the other way. We depend as loan officers, if you're going to be successful and you want to do high volume, right? Like you got to have that. And, I always tell people, and clients will ask me, well, why don't I just work with Rocket Mortgage? They called me and I'm like, or, so-and-so brokerage out of Colorado. I'm like, well, the guy that's sitting in the call center in Colorado doesn't really care whether Emily's happy or not. I do, right? So like my reputation depends on it. I'm not getting any more referrals from Emily or Adam if I'm dropping the ball on deals. Those guys don't, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to get cut off.
Right.
Okay. So to become a high volume lender or a high volume agent, you're not just getting there willy-nilly by accident. there are a lot of systems and
Yeah.
processes that you have implemented in your life that you might not even realize, but they're things that just, it greases the wheels, makes life run more smoothly. Can you share some of yours with us?
Yes. Again, we don't have enough time for them all, but yeah, I've kind of just refined this. I've always been a fan of this, and not not having like 9 million intricate things that I do. I've really kind of pared it down to a handful of things. Your presentation, right? Like I try to keep my presentation over the years, and I've done this for 20 years. So 20 years of having just hundreds and hundreds of people every week every year into my office, those at bats, right? You start to understand at a very intricate kind of fine level when you're talking to people what's going to get the reaction that you want out of them, and you kind of refine that down to a presentation that works pretty much every time. And that's not to say you have to be a robot, and you can't like ad lib a little bit and have fun with people. You certainly can, but it's kind of a script. I hate the word script, but it's sort of a script that works every time. I know that if I present the information in this way, and there'll be outliers, there'll be people that need special attention, but for the vast majority of people out there, that presentation is like going to be the same every time. And if I use that, my team, I've got a really good team behind me, right? And I put the team in place, and we divide our responsibilities. I don't step on my assistant's toes. I don't do the things that I know she's good at that I'm terrible at, and she doesn't get involved in me, and I don't expect her to do my things, right? Like I don't put stuff on her that she shouldn't have on her. I've got 2 assistants that kind of do 2 different things, and we keep that separate. And that flows really good. I always like to say, one of the funnest things about my relationship with my assistants is we don't even talk. We don't really have to talk unless there's a problem. We'll powwow and we'll resolve the problem. But she and I don't really need to talk at all during the day.
You can just feel her
Yeah,
vibe
she just
coming
knows.
through the wall.
Yeah, she just knows what's doing. I know my job. I know my presentation. I turn it over to her. She takes over. If there's a problem, I trust her to let me know. Having trust in those assistants to take care of you and protect your reputation, because that's what she's doing. And she's protecting my reputation. I'm protecting hers and Green State's as a whole. And I kind of trust her to do that. And she's awesome at it. I wouldn't be able to do it without her. So when you talk about the volume that I do, it's not really me. It's the combination of the team and the organization as a whole, and probably 30 other people behind the scenes, the underwriters, the processors, the closers. All those people are working together. It's not just Pete Johnson, the magic loan officer, right? Although I am a little bit, no, I'm just kidding. That's what it is in tracking. They make fun of me all the time at Green State, for my spreadsheets. I'm known as like the spreadsheet guy.
For having a tracker.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a tracker. I'm giving her a hard time about it all the time. You have no sense of accountability if you don't have a tracker.
I track some things. I track where every client comes from, list to sales price ratio, price point, how I reeled them in.
No idea what your performance is at any given time. You got to have trackers.
Well, I know my performance is good.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I remember.
Not this good though.
Yeah, I remember asking. I asked a high performing loan officer. I could probably say her name, Tammy McGarry. She just retired. She was amazing, but she always thought it was really funny because I always asked her. I'm like, hey Tammy, what are you gonna do this month? She's like, I don't know. Whatever I do. And I was always like, no, wrong answer.
Right. See, I agree with you. That's my mentality. You got to have a tracker.
I think I'm more on Tammy's wavelength. I'm like, whatever comes my way, comes my way.
And Tammy was one of the most successful loan officers that we've ever had. And so, so I think it doesn't matter. Like that's what works for me. I know Adam, I've seen your process are even way crazier than mine. Whatever works for you, right? Like if it works for you and you can repeat it and it's successful, I think stick with that. I think you can do that.
But that's what I'm hearing from you. I mean, when I think of the attributes, going back to the beginning here, of what makes a successful loan officer, a successful just salesperson or a realtor, it's structure and discipline. And if you have both of those things, especially for real estate agents, you are your own CEO,
right?
You're your own sales manager, your own CFO, your own marketing manager. You are everything.
Yep.
Nobody's mad at you if you don't go to work.
That's
at 8
right.
o'clock,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and if you quit at 3 rather than work till 6.
Yep. No.
The only accountability is yourself.
Yeah.
So that discipline, I think, is the hardest for most agents. And then having structure is so tough.
Yeah.
And so to me, those are 3 things.
Yeah.
You set goals. Then you outline that process to get that goal.
That's right.
And then you set up a system of trackers to be accountable, to make sure that you're actually accountable to achieving these goals, these benchmarks along the way.
Yep.
And I think those are the most important elements that make
Yeah.
the successful from the non-successful, and,
Yep.
and it's all a mental thing.
Yeah.
You know, you have to. We all are uncomfortable with change or things that we're not used to.
Right.
And it takes time, but once achieved.
Yeah.
What seemed like was tough
Right.
seems easy, and then you can go to the next step.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like one year my goal was 10 million in
Yep.
sales.
Yep.
Well, I hit that. And the next year's like, well, that was simple.
Right.
So next year's 15,
Right.
and then 20, and then
Right.
25, and then
Right.
30. And then last year I did almost 35.
Right.
So, I mean, if you want to run a marathon, you don't go run the 10K right off the bat. You start, you work up to it. You get to the 5K, you're like, well, next year I can do the 10K.
Yep.
And
Yeah, it's like they say in as they say in football all the time. It's kind of a cliche, right? But the little things done often, right? So those little things, you do those little things. I think you focus on those things, and you get those steps in place, and you see what's successful, and those little things repeated over time. The big success is going to come to you, I think, and that's what I've learned just over 20 years. Because I was like, when I was young and first getting in, I'm just like, well, I want to do this. I was just scared out of my mind, right? I'm just like, oh my God, if I don't succeed at this or do this or get this goal or whatever, but then I just kind of like settled down. I had confidence in those little steps that were going to work if I just let them work. And that's how I deal with it now. Like we're in this downturn now. It's kind of freaky, right? Everybody's like, oh my God, and I should be like, normally 10 years ago, I'd be having nervous breakdown right now. Right? I'm like, oh my God, it's over. It's finally over. We're never going to make any money ever again.
I'm going to be an
I'm
Uber
done.
driver.
Yeah. But then I'm kind of like, you know what? I've got these processes in place. They're working. They're still working. It will work itself out. And I've always said that I am the meanest boss I've ever worked for. Like it's like,
I thought it was.
yeah.
I thought I was
Besides
the meanest boss.
you. Yeah. But
Patty boss.
yeah. Well, it's like what Adam says. There's nobody looking over your shoulder in what we do, really. Like, and that's true on our side. Even I work for a company, but there's nobody. I am the guy. Nobody's going to do it if I don't do it. And so, that kind of presses you forward. But then also, I think the successes are much more enjoyable too, because that you kind of did it with the help of your team, obviously. But it was you that did it. It wasn't some boss standing over your shoulder.
yeah.
So it sounds like a common thread between all three of us is each one of us are really self-drivers in our own way. And you have to find a way to take that self-driven motivation, whether
With
it's
discipline and structure.
Yeah.
But you were talking quite a bit about how routines set you free.
Yeah,
like how doing the same thing and it takes time, but being disorganized is unhappiness.
Right.
Discipline is happiness.
Yeah.
And if you can find what tasks you do that are mundane and relatively repetitive, you can take those out. And so one thing that amazes me about you is because I'm big into this too. It is scripts. I use scripts all the time.
Yep.
I use scripts for quality control, so that one client isn't treated different than the other client. But also just from a time management standpoint. We get a lot of agents, right? Like or clients. So I had roughly 65 sales last year. You're somewhere around that too. But how many people apply for a loan in a year?
Thousands, probably.
Thousands
I tried to look this up, and it's probably 1,500 people.
It's impossible for you to do a custom email to all of them.
Yeah,
you have to have and the email from application at 9 a.m. and the application at 10 a.m. It's not much different in substance.
Yeah.
So having a script, you could still personalize it, but having a basis but then what is the email after they get the commitment letter, after an accepted offer, after, having that all set up. And then it saves time. It allows you to have higher volume.
Yeah, exactly. And then having mechanisms in place for when people, are falling out of the. So you have the automated systems. When things are going well, the automated systems are working great. But it's when things go badly, having a system for catching those people and making sure that you get back in the loop personally and get involved. But those are going to be few and far between. And those scripts allow you to move through volume and say the time. Because if I did something differently with every client, I was trying to reinvent the wheel on every client, the amount of time wasted is just astronomical. You wouldn't get anywhere with it, And so I try to tell people that too. And I get some resistance from some, like younger loan officers like, well, that seems kind of impersonal or this or that. And I'm like, it is, but it isn't. It's actually achieving what they need. They need that. And I know that this gives them what they need. And I know that it's going to come back to me.
And they just want you to touch base with them.
They do.
They don't want you to ignore them. Just because even what seems like a small task to us, they don't understand the process.
Yeah. And 95% of the people are going to fit in that system well. You're going to have that 5% outliers. And those are the people like you're going to have to spend time with, which is okay. You're going to have those people that just need that extra attention, and that's okay. You have the time for it, because you followed your scripts, you followed your processes, you'll have time to do those things, and hopefully have some kind of a life too.
Okay.
Work-life balance. It's important.
Yeah.
Do you want to chat a little bit about what you think the 2023 market is going to be like? What are you seeing? You've mentioned to me before that you think lenders, they start seeing things maybe 3 to 4 weeks before agents start seeing it.
Yeah.
So your application volume is up?
Yeah, it's actually been really good. I mean, in December when we were, we talked a little bit before we started here about kind of some of our products were suspended, and it was looking pretty dreary there for a while. This is kind of an unprecedented thing. I mean, this is my third probably crazy mortgage downturn. I mean, I was lending in '08. And this is probably the worst it's been since then, but I would say that it has also kind of bounced back really fast. So, I mean, it's swinging back the other way. Yeah. And so the rates have dropped really substantially, which has helped. And then, our pre-approvals have gone way up for me, at least in the last few weeks, especially. And they tend to be quality buyers too. So I'm finding that the people that are coming in are qualified and they're motivated, So inventory is still the problem. Yeah. And that's what I hear from agents too, is that and builders, I have builders call me every spring and late fall when they're trying to decide how many holes to put in the ground, how many houses to start. And we're still gonna I think be lacking inventory in this market, which will make things interesting for sure. But at least we have the buyers, and I think it's going to work out okay. Is it going to be 2021 and 2020? Probably not.
Yeah.
But that's okay. And not everything can be boom, right? So
in talking to those buyers, do you feel like the general buyer population has been traumatized over the last 2 years or so, or do they think that the rules of the game is going to be drastically different this year? What's the attitude?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I mean, they're definitely paying attention to like national media and stuff like that. They're hearing that a little bit, but I think as real estate professionals, as mortgage professionals, we're so absorbed, reading every article and kind of reading every tip and talking to people. I think we kind of think it's a bigger deal in the consumer's mind than the consumer's mind really does. I mean, when they come in, they maybe heard a few things. I'm like, I'll sit down and talk about rates. You've heard rates are a little higher, right? I'm just like waiting for them to go. And then they're like, oh yeah, something about that. I don't remember exactly what. And then you kind of like, oh, okay, great. All right. And then I think there is a shock, especially initially after COVID, when rates, went from being 2% to 5 or 6% and then rapidly up to 7%. I think there was some shock in there for several months. But now that rates have been in the 6s and 7s and they've fallen back down, it's funny how quick people forget, right? And then they come back in my office like, oh, thank God, only 5.25, thank God, and it's like really? It's like, that's awesome.
It's all relative. Yeah.
Yeah, they forget, people forget quick, they get readjusted quick, so I don't think it's going to be as big of a problem as even I thought it would be. Even I thought it was going to be a big problem before, and I don't think it's going to be quite as bad. Again, it's not going to be as busy, but I don't think it's going to be quite as devastating as we thought it might be. So,
okay.
Yeah.
No Uber Eats for you.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, Pete, thanks so much for joining Adam and I here on the podcast. And we'd love to have you back again.
Yeah.
So there is always a lot to talk about when it comes to the interplay between realtors and lenders and how we make it all work.
Yeah, always. It never ends. So yeah, thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah. You bet.
All right. You heard it here on Hear This.